Hello, love. I'm Heather Seipel, intuitive psyche specialist, energy body specialist, and sacred union coach. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to my new YouTube channel. I'm very grateful for your presence here. Today I want to talk a bit about telepathy. I'll get to telepathy in relationships a little bit later and explain some situational issues and how to resolve those matters. But first I want to explain a little bit about what telepathy is and some common misunderstandings that I see happening so very often, unfortunately. So when our society, if you will, explains a bit about telepathy, people will say that telepathy is a mind energetic connection. Some people will even think of it as reading someone's mind, but that is very, very different from what is actually happening. In our world, we are very trained on how to use our mind and how to think that our mind really is all of us. As we do energy work, we learn more and more that we have more aspects to our system, and there's far more wisdom that's happening in our body, in our organs, than we may have previously thought was the case. And that's actually what's happening when it comes to telepathy. A lot of the times in television and movies, they will depict telepathy as a connection through the mind, and that's not where the energy is actually landing. There's a podcast that's out that is really kind of taking the world by storm, and it's really lovely. And it's called the Telepathy Tapes. And it's a lady who does like videography, documentary type of films. And she really kind of hit some really key, crucial, really cool information, talking to children who are nonverbal and their parents. And as I was listening, I really actually only listened to a bit of it, but one of my dear friends kind of gave me a debriefing on a lot of the other components. But she was kind of speaking to those who may have been a bit more skeptical, which is not probably my following here. You know, I'm an energy practitioner, so I would imagine a lot of people here know a good bit about energy and know that telepathy is a very substantial thing. But one of the things that I found fascinating was the way that one of the children described how the telepathic connection was stronger. And it's, you know, these are nonverbal children, right? And so there was a little bit of a lost in translation thing, sort of like when someone's translating from another language into English, the phrasing may be a little different. And I find it so adorable, especially the way this particular child expressed it, right? The way that she said it was that the telepathic connection is stronger if the person believes in her. And I was like, oh, that is absolutely beautiful, because it really speaks to where the telepathic connection is emanating from. Instead of the mind, the telepathic connection actually emanates initially in the heart. The mind gets informed later, but the whole body is actually getting a lot of data and a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, and a lot more than you would probably imagine if you were just simply reading someone's mind. It is absolutely fascinating, but it's very, very crucial to our really close connections in our relationships, family and romantic relationships, both. They're very, very important. So before I get into the complexities of telepathy in a romantic relationship, I would really first want to explain how it is that I know that most people do telepathy. Most people have done telepathy. And what I find to be most important is to notice when it's happening, what that looks like for that particular connection, and how to know when it's not happening, or when there's some issue to begin to resolve energetically to make that connection happen a little bit more clearly. And it can really benefit relationships, especially romantic relationships. But I want to start with children. So when a baby is born, obviously they cannot speak, right? And when they were in spirit, which, was right before they incarnated, right? So they're already very familiar with speaking in telepathy, right? What a lot of people who don't notice this very much happening for them may not realize is there's a send button. It's like if you typed out a text message but didn't send it to the person, you wouldn't expect them to have gotten the message and know what you're talking about, right? A big misconception when it comes to telepathy is that, oh my God, somebody can read my thoughts. Someone can just simply read my mind. But that's not actually the case. There's a lot of privacy when it comes to telepathic connections in people. And this happens and has been happening for our whole lives. And we don't necessarily know that particularly, but it can seem like somebody might be invading your thoughts or whatnot, but actually that's not how it happens at all. There is a send button on your telepathic connection. But when babies are first born, they don't have a lot of complex thoughts in this new world because they're just arriving here. They really don't have much to do except lay around, sleep, eat, and so the information that's sent on that telepathic connection is usually pretty basic or rudimentary, right? They're having a biological function, they're hungry. So that kind of beams out from them, and before they begin crying, usually they beam out a telepathic connection about this. I'll tell you a story in a second. But what's really important to know here is that not every energy body is going to connect telepathically to another system in the same way, right? So you could actually currently be having multiple telepathic connections with different people, family members, friends, a romantic partner, and they can be active, but they can be at different strengths or different levels or to different degrees, right? It's very, very specific between the two individuals. It's very unique. What's happening there is specific to those two people's systems. So if you're having an issue with a telepathic connection, say for example, you're a new mother and you don't seem to really be picking up what the baby is really kind of conveying, it really is dependent upon, it could be your own system and you could do some energy work there, but it could just be the fact that the child has a different energetic system type that doesn't connect quite as much or as smoothly, right? So I'll tell you the story. So when my daughter was first born, I had just spent about 2 months worrying and worrying and worrying that I would not hear her when she would cry, after she was born. I was like, oh my gosh, what, I'm charged with the responsibility of this child, and what if I sleep through her crying? It was a substantial worry for me. Now, anybody who's had a child before or who had siblings growing up would know to tell a worried mother, that's expecting, you don't have to worry about that. When a baby cries, it almost feels like the cells of your body are coming apart, and until you resolve the issue, that it's unmistakable. No one in the house will be able to sleep if a baby is crying, but I didn't know that, right? And so when she was born, I was really, really worried. And, but what happened was actually the opposite of that. And I knew nothing about telepathy. This is why my number one point of this whole video is telepathy happens naturally. It's just completely natural. If it's happening, it's happening. If it's not, it's not. And respect that and honor that. You can do certain things on your own end. But the trying to make it happen usually makes it not happen, right? So usually when we're unwitting about this and it just happens naturally, you don't even notice. It's literally a communication style. It's a communication type. It just happens, and it happens quite uniquely, right? So when my daughter was first born, what I would notice would happen is literally the split second that she would wake up and come to consciousness, so would I. It was literally like the split second. And I would come to consciousness before my eyes were even open. I could hear her little diaper move as her body, like she's coming to consciousness and she's starting to wiggle. And I would wake up and feed her and change her and then put her back to bed. And I was just kind of startled because I had never heard of this happening before with anyone ever. You know, generally people are like, oh, the baby wakes up and cries. Well, that wasn't happening with me. And so she may not be pleased to hear this story, but after about a month or 6 weeks or so of this happening, she literally wouldn't cry, because anytime she would need anything, I was right there and addressing her needs. So I didn't hear her voice. And after about 6 weeks, you know, of having a child, it feels like, you know, this has been the experience forever. You could barely remember what it was like not having a child. It's just such a drastically different paradigm and shift, right? But it felt like forever, and I had not heard her voice. So what I would do is, as she was laying there, and I knew, because I felt like the ping of sorts, like I knew she needed something and I knew what it was, right? So like maybe she was hungry or she needed to be changed or whatever. I would know, and I would have her laying in front of me, and I would, you know, be looking at her and smiling real big, and I would wait for her to cry because I wanted to hear her voice. And so it was very fascinating. And so she would, you know, like, you know, like, and I would just keep beaming, you know, this big smile at her, and she would be like, you know, like she was super confused. She's like, why are you looking at me? Do the thing. Like, you know, you need to do the thing. And so she would cry, and I'm like, oh, I heard her voice. And then, you know, I would tend to her. But she knew I was right there. You know, it wasn't like she was feeling abandoned or anything. It was more like, do what I want, you know. And so anyone who knows her now would be kind of shocked to hear the story that she didn't cry for the first month or two of her life, because she's very loud and vocal now. But you know, it's really fascinating. And what's even more fascinating to me, well, in hindsight, now that I understand telepathy, I understand energy bodies, I understand how to resolve issues and get things working properly, which I definitely did not know back then. I realized that her system type is actually the system type that's least likely to connect very much. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Her system, for some reason, opted to connect very well with me. But knowing her personally, I'm like, oh, well, that was because she wanted her needs met. But, you know, it's fascinating because her system type really isn't the one that's going to predominantly connect very strongly or in a very large way. But we really did have quite a telepathic connection as I'm looking back over her younger years, and as she grew older, like there were things that I just was able to know, and it was smooth, it was easy, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also understand that that's not always the case when a baby is born, or, you know, when a child is young, or maybe they connect stronger with one parent and not quite as strongly with another. And that can, you know, sometimes feel insulting, or, you know, like it's hurting your emotions. It's like when my grandson was born, he did not connect with me because I was so excited. I was like, oh, it's my first grandchild, you know, and he was like, you know, hand to the face. Like, he did not want any sort of telepathic connection with me. But he would connect with my mom. And so I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Well, that's really lovely. You know, it's good to know. I'm not going to take offense or insult to that. I'm just going to notice it. But thankfully, he connected a fair degree, like a pretty good open amount to his mother. And so I was like, oh, thank goodness. And even now, he's like 6, you know, she and he can really, like, she can know exactly what he needs when he needs it, and she's very attentive to that. And I was like, oh, phew, you know. But then when my granddaughter was born, she was very much more willing to connect energetically with my system and develop that telepathic connection. And we have a very smooth communication and interaction. We can, you know, kind of be on the same page and understand one another. And if she's having a bit of an issue with something, I can kind of understand her way and her process, and you know, we can kind of get on that same page a lot faster. Of course, there are moments where her system just kind of spirals out and goes into sensory overload, and no one's getting through at that point. And that's okay, because, you know, the more and more that time progresses, the more and more neurodiverse individuals are going to be born on this planet. So it's quite absolutely okay that individuals will shift. This is a very dynamic connection. You know, sometimes you could be upset with someone and not really want to communicate all that much with them, and that's absolutely fine. But it's the same with your telepathic connection. Now, another thing that can happen is that the telepathic connection can close off or close and come back. Now, this is very painful, especially in a romantic relationship, but we'll talk about that in a little while. But it can also happen with a child or parent. Parent, you know, is definitely going to be one of those. Once you've reached a certain age, you know, there's a certain complexity that happens with the telepathic connection with a parent, right? So the child begins to individuate. That's very healthy. They begin to develop. They don't need as large of a telepathic connection. They don't need to communicate as much data to the parent as they did when they couldn't talk, you know? So it's natural for that telepathic connection to sort of get a little bit smaller, but still convey the data that's important, right? So, you know, when a baby is little, it's like, I'm hungry, right? Well, maybe when a kid is 4, they still might need to send that particular message out. I'm hungry, you know. But when they're maybe 17 years old, maybe the parent doesn't actually need to know that particular data. They can communicate with their mouth. They may not, their system might not feel like sharing that particular type of information, and just because of that, the connection might get a little smaller. This is healthy. This is natural. You know, I mean, let's think about it. You don't really necessarily need to / want to feel when your adult child is like engaging in a romantic experience. That's not any of anybody's business, right? That's their business. They need to be dealing with that on themselves. So, you know, but when you're in a romantic relationship, that's going to be something that might be important to your own connection, right? Having that data come through on your own romantic relationship is probably more important than you knowing about that, you know, knowing that about your grown child having, you know, interactions. And different people handle these things differently, right? It is very healthy mentally, emotionally, and energetically when a child begins to grow and cuts the apron strings. This is a natural, healthy progression. And if it doesn't happen, which in, you know, a lot of instances these days, it doesn't happen very much or very smoothly. And then that's where, you know, other people, counseling and whatnot, energetic support and assistance can help the person to develop and grow, because parent-child relationships are a whole complexity. But when it comes to romantic relationships, there can be a lot of complexity there, right? So usually so hang on, I've got like 4 things to say and they're all trying to come out at the same time. So first, let me say this. The way that I approach romantic relationships, now that I conceptually understand that telepathy is just like a ping, a data, it feels like a phone line being open that you usually don't use. But sometimes it can feel like somebody just hung up on you and you're like, wait, you know, you're nowhere near them, but all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, wait, where are they? You know, where did they go? And so it can definitely feel like this very subconscious open line of connection. But considering we don't think about telepathy in that way, it might sound a little odd for me to say that when it comes to romantic relationships, I do not choose to engage in a steady, committed, exclusive romantic relationship with someone who the telepathy connection has not started yet. In my mind, with my level of awareness, I'm like, well, this isn't the person that I'm meant to be connected with, because this is clearly not happening. Now, the level to which the connection happens to me isn't so relevant. I'm like, as long as it's starting, we'll, advance the connection as time goes on. But I need to notice that it can happen, because otherwise what's going to happen is I'm going to have a mind and an emotional relationship with this person. I'm not going to have an energetic connection. And over time, the mind and emotion relationships just become harder. They become harder to do, and they don't weather the pains of life quite as well. And they also don't saturate and fill you quite as much. And no judgment as to your choice in romantic relationships. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying for me, I'm not going to choose to further a relationship along if we're not having one of those main important building blocks that I notice happening in a relationship, right? So it offers a smoothness of communication. Now, this can sometimes seem like dopamines are flushing in your brain. The serotonin is just like making you super happy. So how do you know if it's telepathy or you're just feeling really well? Well, time will tell. You'll see if you notice, right? Synchronicities that happen if you say the same sentence over, like at the same time, that's a good little indicator. If they begin to know what you're wanting sort of before you ever tell them, that is clear telepathy, right? If they show up with roses and you had been thinking about roses all day, obvious, yes, that's a good sign. But one little indicator is not enough to confirm that, right? Give it time, give it a matter of weeks, couple months would be ideal. Again, not telling you what to do in your own relationships, just saying if you really want to go masterfully and carefully and wisely into a connection and notice what's happening, give it time for you to notice, right? So what can also happen is resolutions of issues can happen a hell of a lot quicker because you can communicate clearer. And what I mean by that is that you're not just using words. Even though your conscious mind thinks that you're just using words, your system is actually sending off the data to that other person of what you actually really want to kind of a T, right? Like very, very precisely, very, very clearly. And not everyone in this world's telepathic lens, the connection may be very clear. It might be a little smudged on one side. They might get it sort of correct, that's still okay. And, but cultivating your own energetics is definitely the best way to go, which I'll mention more about that in a second. But just to speak more about this, it's like, sort of like if they say one sentence and you really understand like paragraphs, like you really get it. Like there's more data coming through, which definitely you can read the codes in somebody's voice. If they say something with a heavy tone, you understand like, oh, that, that's weighing heavy on their heart, or they didn't like that or something, right? There's tones that we can read otherwise, but it's important to understand that as humans, we aren't just a mind, we aren't just a pair of eyes, we aren't just a pair of ears, we aren't just readers of energy in one kind of way. And to isolate, right, like, oh, that was a telepathic understanding when they said this, this, and this. Well, your ears were hearing, your ears were reading energy too, your eyes were seeing their demeanor, right? It's all working together, and that's natural. That's how it's supposed to be, right? And also, you can pick up data just from your eyes, just from your ears, just from your mind, just from the telepathy connection, but it's generally more conclusive when you're kind of getting a whole demeanor kind of experience, right? But what happens when somebody says something or does something that hurts your heart? I call it the shutters of the heart, like the little shutter doors close and then the telepathic line gets cut off. Well, for some people, say for example, they're at work, you're at home, and you're, plinking about doing your thing, and all of a sudden at 3 p.m, like, you feel like, wait, hello, is anybody there? You feel that telepathy line just cut off. And you're like, what happened? Did I do something? Okay, this is a heightened situation. I have heard a lot of clients mention this, and it can cause someone to go into a heightened state of distress, we'll put it that way. A mild case of panic, sometimes a little bit more than mild case of panic, depending on the person. At that moment, it is highly advisable to have the correct energy work to do and start doing it right then and there if you're having distress, right? If it's just something that's noticeable, then you'll generally find out later what actually happened at 3 p.m. on their end, right? The data isn't necessarily clear because it's cut off. You have no more data. So sometimes, like say for example, if someone has a cheating wounding, all of a sudden their mind is gonna like start running like, oh my God, they're cheating on me, they're leaving me, that's not healthy. That's at the point where you need to sit down and do some energy work, right, for yourself, because you don't actually know why that connection did in fact like hang up on their end. And usually you'll find out, and a lot of the times you'll realize that some people's heart shutters close a little bit quicker than others. Some people's heart shutters are quick to close and quick to reopen. However, now this can be emotional or energetic, whichever plane of existence that you're understanding it on. But if you have the case where you're in a relationship with someone who goes hot and cold, right? Open and then shut and open and shut, and you have this repeated experience over time, there's 2 things to understand. That is an abuse pattern that they may have no control over. Both of those concepts really need to be sat with and understood, right? This is in fact an abuse pattern that they probably have no control over. So what I'm saying here is that it's probably highly unwise to bring it to their attention verbally, right? They probably already have some level of awareness, even if it's like super vague, that their heart contracts when certain things happen, right? And they probably don't know what to do about it, right? People can spend like years, if not decades, in counseling and never get that resolved. That's an energetic level issue, right? But at the same time, we see over and over again in relationships that people have a tendency when they're in a relationship with someone like that to justify and wear rose-colored glasses. So what I say to do, and is very important to do, is to really just realize for yourself, like, this is an abuse pattern. I am experiencing an abuse pattern. Also, they can't do anything about it, so I need to sit with it and see what I'm actually open for and what I'm choosing. And there's a lot that we have not been taught about relationships, about emotions, and definitely about energetics. So in my container where I teach level 4 energy work, which I have a video coming out next week, which will explain the different, there's no particular levels of energy work, but I broke it down by like skill sets that you learn by doing different levels of energy work. And it's really, really informative. So I definitely recommend that you check that out. But depending on what their level of capacity is to be able to resolve this, it's not actually an issue to bring forward to them. If you're like, man, it is so warm when you're so connected with me, and it is so fucking cold when you cut me out, right? Like, I mean, maybe explaining that to them, but there's a very fair chance that they actually already know that because they're feeling the experience of doing it right? So they have some experiential awareness of this. Maybe not a hyper conscious mind awareness of it, but they do have a certain level of awareness of it, and they probably don't know how to resolve it. So you need to really be present with resolving what's happening on your own heart space, which is what I highly recommend anyone doing. And when it comes to any sort of relationship issue and it comes to energetics, what I say is no matter what the person that you're with has going on in their system, it is specific to your system as to why you decided to be in a committed relationship with them, right? Say, for example, this is like super common, right? You're like, oh my God, I so love this about this person, but this thing about this person is not what I would have chosen, right? Okay, that's not actually accurate. You did in fact choose both, right? But it is good information, highly important information to know what you really, really love and what you really, really don't. But it's really important for you, in order to resolve anything, to say, my system chose all of what is in their system. Because you can begin to identify what inside of your particular constellation needs the actual adjustment, right? And it doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly not like them anymore and you're gonna be like, ugh, I don't want to be with them. That's actually not how it happens usually, most of the time. I mean, unless you're in a hyper abusive or caustic or soul level intensity drama, usually your system will tweak, like, oh, I never even thought about this inside of my system, because we're not taught about these things. You tweak it, and all of a sudden, usually you'll start to notice a shift and an adjustment in their system, which is fascinating. I freaking love when that happens. As I've been adjusting my own energy body, I've been seeing shifts and up levels in other people who are very, very close to me. And I love when that happens. You know, there's some telepathic connection happening there. If their system's like, oh, I'm reading what you're putting out, you know, like, let me shift and adjust. Like, how hella cool is that? And it's a good way to know that there's some telepathic connection there, right? Like, it's a good, nice little read when their energy is picking up what you're putting down. I had this relationship one time. Now, I was in college, so we were pretty young, you know, definitely didn't know anything about energy work, and did not even know we were doing really freaking amazing telepathy. We had a really huge, like, telepathic connection. It was great. Our relationship was so smooth. Like, we communicated completely smoothly. And I mean, we were both like A students. I mean, he was a 4.0. He's definitely smarter than me, but as he did point out some of the time. But that actually didn't close off my telepathic connection to him. His criticisms weren't the thing that like did it. But at one point in time, I mean, we had been finishing each other's sentences. He would know what I wanted before I even knew what I wanted. He was like, oh, you need a shoulder massage right now. And I'm like, oh man, my shoulders are really hurting. You know, like, I never could understand how he knew in advance to my own conscious mind knowing something. It's really, really fascinating. But I purport, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I purport that most romantic relationships have some degree of operational telepathic connection. Whether you notice it, whether it's happening regularly, whether you're misinterpreting their responses or something, generally, unless you feel completely shut off and like completely cold, like they're completely cold, usually there's some level of telepathic connection operational. So if people want a larger telepathic connection, then they can do like the work on their own heart space. And just cleansing it off is just not going to do the trick. You really need to go in and actually resolve the issues that are constellated in your system. So how it enmeshes in your energy body, causing your thought processes, causing you to operate in a certain way, right? You need to adjust the operating system to really get that heart energy like cleared off, you know, like that lens to be shining very, very clearly. And we don't really realize, because again, we're still in some fairly early stages of existentialism when it comes to like society really understanding high level energetics. And even at level 4 energy work, as grateful as I am for it, I know there are many more layers and levels of energy work to come, which we will be having a way more heightened and fast-paced experience with up-leveling our system. But for now, I'm really, really hella grateful for level 4 energy work. But in this particular relationship, at one point in time, something happened. And it was nothing he did wrong or bad, or that wasn't awful at all. He really got this amazing opportunity. And he was going to be gone for 2 months to study. And I mean, we both just were like amazed. We were over the moon. Like, I was so proud of him. You know, we were broke college students. So an opportunity this huge was really, really important, you know. So mentally, emotionally, I was like super happy for him. But unbeknownst to me, my energy body did something totally different. It smacked the heart shutters closed. And I did not realize until I was 42 years old, like literally more than half of my life after this relationship had happened, I realized like what had happened, because the downfall of the relationship was he comes back and everything feels different. Something is just off. Mentally, we were still there. We cared, we loved, we presented ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. We cared, we put in as much effort as we did. We had a whole nother year of relating to one another and being in relationship. But there was just something off, you know? And he kept using this phrase that I couldn't for the life of me understand. He said, "You're shutting me out." I mean, for 20 something years, I didn't have a clue what the hell that meant. I was like, I'm here. Like, I'm emotionally present. Like, I'm doing all the things. Like, how am I shutting you out? And then he would say something else. "I don't matter to you anymore." And I was like, what? You know, this makes no sense, right? Could you imagine this happening in counseling, right? Two people going back and forth, and the counselor's like, "No, really, she like really cares about you. She's super present. Like, she's, I don't know what you're talking about." Making him wrong for what he knew on some level was being experienced, but I couldn't even understand it. We both knew something was missing because our communication wasn't matching up like it was, right? Before, we would finish each other's sentences. And when I say finish each other's sentences, that may not be highly descriptive. We would start talking, and about 2 words out of our mouth, the other person would respond to what we were gonna say, like the whole sentence. And then as soon as that person would get about 2 words out, the other person was responding. And we had entire conversations this way, right? So we were, I called it, we were very in sync, right? So we lost our in syncness, but I was like, well, I mean, you know, that happens. Most regular relationships, people aren't finishing each other's sentences. We're fine. Yes, I know. When people say, "Oh, our relationship is fine," I'm like, "Ooh," right? Like, I've been there. I know this, right? And I truly believe that, you know, we rarely see it, but I truly believe that is quite possible. When you see like a couple who are like in their 80s and they still have like stars in their eyes for each other, and you could just see the light lighting up in each of them when they look at each other. I truly believe that that can happen way more oftenly than it is happening. I hear people all the time saying, "Well, you know, we've been married for 10 years, so it's completely normal that like we've, you know, lost like the oomph, you know, like now we're just like settled into a regular relationship." And I'm like, well, if that's what you want, 2 thumbs up to you. Like, great. If that's your choice. But what I would really prefer to hear them say is, "Our relationship has dulled and our connection is dim, but I'm actually completely comfortable with that." Like, own it, you know, like just be like, "Okay, yeah, there's something wrong, but I'm not going to work on it," you know? But there can be luster and life and light happening all along the way. What does it matter the amount of time that you've been with someone, right? That telepathic connection keeps things alive. Every moment, it's real. It's right here. It's right now. And when it shuts off, it's like, it's just like gone. It's dead. So it can definitely come back on, especially if you understand that, oh, you can work on your heart space, right? Well, if it cut off in your person, you know that the heart space is the issue. Do you need to say, I'm sorry, right? Like that could actually be the thing that would reopen their heart space, right? But if you're like, well, I don't need to say I'm sorry, it may actually resolve the issue. I'm not saying say you're sorry when you're insincere, because they can feel that, you know, but getting to like that level of awareness of like, what is really important here, right? What am I sacrificing? Sometimes when we make certain moves, we can't take them back, right? So I'm just kind of putting out a whole boatload of data here. I mean, I could go into like many different directions, like if this is your situation and if this is your situation. Actually, I'm going to go into one other one, like one more example here. So if, say, for example, you're with a person and you feel your heart bleeding and wanting connection with them, and they're like, yep, no, I gotta run. What I want you to like reframe in your mind, and this is going to be really hard to hear, so if you need to like click pause and then like replay the video after taking a couple breaths, like yeah, fair warning, because this is a harsh one to hear, right? So if you're the one who's like, but I want connection with this person, I want you to think of energetically being like all up in their space, wanting, like, right? And so they're like, like, I need my personal space. Telepathic connections are actually really respectful of privacy and personal space. You don't lose who you are when you energetically connect with someone. You still have the ramifications of you. And it can be very painful when relationship dynamics run this like push-pull dynamic, or runner chaser, or whatever you want to call it. But if you feel like your heart is bleeding and wanting, it's really crucial to go in and look at your own constellation of what is causing that. Because a lot of the times, not all of the times, but I mean, I would say at least half of the time, you could actually like resolve something in your heart, and then like they might like crack the window, you know, and be like, oh, hi, I'm open to you this much, you know. And that's better than no connection at all, where it feels really, really cold, right? So a lot of people try to behaviorally like pull back from the other person, but you're not energetically pulling back from them. I know, I've actually been there too. So I'm no judgment. I understand there's like no judgment in my space. As long as someone's like willing to understand and willing to own their shit, like I am open to any scenario, you know, what has happened, what is happening, what could be a potential resolution, right? Because high-level energetic relationships are what is going to carry our society forward, and it's really going to up-level the energetics. There's massive reasons as to why systematically over time relationships between romantic partners have been sliced. It's been cut, and it's been, I mean, I have a degree in history. I could like chart the entire history of it. Actually, on my old YouTube channel somewhere, I have a video that it was like an hour and a half long, just basically starting the initial like what the fuck happened in relationships between men and women, like systemically going back historically and charting the progress. And there's just a ton of energetic separation that has occurred, and it's really, really ingrained into our energy bodies even still, right? So the level of energy work that needs to be done is really fucking deep and really a bit much. Like it's challenging to a degree, but it's so worth it. It's so super beneficial when you start like getting those components out, especially for females, because a big way that this was done were these themes of misogyny, and there's like thousands. It's pervasive, right? I mean, outrageous, overt, ridiculous misogyny isn't something that you hear all that much anymore these days, but it's still in our own energy bodies, especially females. So that crap really needs to be like parsed out, and like those threads really like, you know, cleared up, because we females don't realize how much energetic misogyny we're beaming out from ourselves every day. It's a whole thing. Anyways, that's a different video for a whole nother day, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of reasons why someone's heart can, you know, have the shutters closed or feel like there's a wall up. A lot of the time, grief will do that. You know, grief can be a main culprit. So we definitely don't want to jump to any conclusions, and I definitely don't want you to think that there's simple or easy resolutions. Like, oh, well, their heart shutter's closed, so they just need to open it, right? That's oversimplified and not caring, you know? So let's not approach in that respect, but let's really lay all the cards out on the table and really get an understanding of what's going on here, so that you can really have that joy and that peace and that level of aliveness that, you know, is the relationship that you might want to be in. So, and if you're having the issue where you're having a difficulty finding options of really wonderful romantic partners, and you're like, I am not willing to settle for that, like, or I haven't even had any requests for a date in like 5 years or something, like I'm just not getting experiences that are even remotely anywhere near an option, I highly encourage you to check out next week's video. Module 2 of level 4 energy work, module 1 of level 4 energy work is going to hold the reason for that in there, and you're going to want to look for the word uneclipsing. Yeah. So check that out, and you'll understand the energetic reason that that's the case. Anything that's you're not experiencing that you do want to experience, uneclipsing, that's going to be the explanation for that. So that'll be coming next week. But for this week, let me recap. Okay, telepathic connection through the heart space. It happens completely naturally. If you try to make it happen, like that's when it's not going to happen. When you work on your own heart space, that's when you will have the progress with it. More importantly than trying to make anything happen is noticing in hindsight what has happened, what has evolved, what is showing me that we're having that heart connection, rather than having to articulate from our mind and, you know, with tons and tons of words. Like, do we really get each other on a strong level? Actually, I'm going to tell one more quick story about that. I knew someone that we had a somewhat brief connection, like, you know, like we hung out for a matter of weeks. And I mean, I'm a level 4 energy practitioner. I was speaking in high level energy language, right? Like some of my level 1 energy practitioner friends wouldn't have understood what the fuck I was talking about, right? I mean, I did not edit it, I didn't tailor it, and I just spoke completely just as I would normally, you know, like with like my high level friends. And he literally understood everything that I was talking about, and I knew that he understood everything that I was talking about because he would use his own words and say, you mean this? And like say it back to me sort of in layman's terms. And I was like, exactly, yes. Well, then events transpired, his heart was hurting, you know, whatever. So a matter of months later, we ended up in a conversation, and I was speaking like I did regularly, and he wasn't understanding a goddamn thing I was saying. He was like, what? Like, I mean, he didn't know anything about energy. So you wouldn't expect anyone who didn't know anything about energy to understand high level energetic language. So it was more logical when he was like, I don't understand what you're talking about, than it was when he was like, oh, you mean this, you know, I'm like, okay, that is a very clear indicator of telepathy happening. The heart translates and the data comes through, right? There's an understanding that's happening on a deeper level than the mind. That's my final example of what I mean by telepathy is a heart connection, not a mind connection. Your mind gets informed after the data runs into the heart. Your mind gets informed, but other parts of your body get informed too. You know, your liver holds wisdom, your kidneys do a thing. You know, like your gallbladder is like actually active here. Now, I'm not gonna even lie and say I have any awareness of what those organs are doing in a interaction with a person. Like, I do know what my heart is doing. I know what my general energy is doing. I know what my mind is doing, and I know what my emotions are doing. That's a lot of stuff to track. I really don't know what my gallbladder is doing in any particular interaction, but what I do know is it's doing something. I know enough to know that, right? So it's not surprising at all for me to say, oh, well, my heart is the one that's getting the data first, and then translating it or sending the data where it needs to go in my body for me to make the decisions that I need to be informed for, right? Like, it's sending that data where it needs to go so I can then decide what to do and move forward with, right? So if your connection is difficult with someone, first thing to note is their system and your system may just not have the correct components for a very huge connection. Maybe the connection is very, very small, and that's okay, right? To respect other people's system is paramount. Respect what their system is. Now, I will have a class coming out maybe next year, maybe later this year, I don't know, about the different energy body archetypes, so you could understand like how different systems are motivated, and what they're really, really like stalled out by. You know, some people don't realize sometimes in romantic relationships, they could be doing a particular behavior that's the exact caustic behavior to the other person in the relationship, because the system type may just, you know, be averse to that. And if they just tweak, you know, the way that they're presenting something, it actually could motivate their person, right? So understanding the energy body archetypes it's really important, especially I would say for children, if you have like children or grandchildren, but it can help with any interaction, even coworkers and whatnot. It's, you know, I think motivated, like when it comes to like someone being motivated, if you know that like, oh, if I say it this way, I'm pressing the gas and like we can have movement forward. If I say it to this person this way, it's going to be pressing the brakes, and this is going to be a very, very painful and difficult interaction, right? I think sometimes the way that things are presented is a big part of a lot of issues that come up. And it's indicative of what energetic patterns are running in and through each person. So sometimes you can just kind of understand and adjust a little bit. Sometimes it's a lot deeper of an energetic issue. But maturity levels are also a varying factor. So anyways, I'm going to be doing lots and lots more videos, not so much about telepathy. This is, I think, probably my main transmission on this topic, but I'll definitely be teaching a lot more about energetic relationships and soul generations, right? What the different soul generations are here doing and how their system operates. I teach a lot about the operating system of an energy body and therefore a psyche. And I talk a lot about the operating system, especially of feminine energy bodies. So if you do, in fact, check out my video next week on the different skill sets that you learn in different levels of energy work, just keep in mind, I'll have a link here in the description of this video for my level 4 energy work container, so you can kind of look at that if it sounds interesting to you. But just keep in mind, like, hang out and wait until next week's video comes out and you hear like the different levels of energy work and exactly what that means. because before you join a container, you may need to know whether or not you can do the level of energy work that is required, because this is definitely the most challenging energy work that I've ever done, but I'm so freaking excited to share it and to teach it and to see the breakthroughs that happen when people actually learn how to create strategy when it comes to their energy work and use the correct tools when is needed for particular scenarios. So it's called relationship mastery. Of course, it's most important to master the relationship with ourselves first, and then we really kind of, I guess you would say, focus in a way on romantic relationships, but really any relationships, even your relationship with money, can be worked in this container for sure. But it's mainly to learn the skill sets and the tools of level 4 energy work, which is just downright drastically different from level 3 energy work. So yeah, very fascinating. So yeah, keep in mind that this video will be out next week. And if you would like to offer me a very generous donation, a like, or even like a comment, like with a heart emoji in, on this video, would be a huge gift for me. And I would be so grateful. I would send out just love energy from my heart. And so, but before you click the subscribe button, you may want to watch next week's video on the different skill sets learned in energy work, because when I started really delving into level 4 energy work, one of the things that I realized is that my new perceptions that kind of opened up made some of my understandings of energy work kind of go against or fly in the face of prevailing thought in different schools of thought of energy work now. It kind of made it seem quite different. So the things that you may hear on this channel coming out from me may sound just, completely odd or, directly against what you've previously heard. And so if you're not up for that, just fair warning before clicking subscribe. If at any point in time you're like, yeah, no, I'm gonna unsubscribe, that's highly encouraged. Definitely do what feels best for you, because when you include your energy into a container by subscribing, that's actually an energetic that's occurring. So I definitely want that to be a mindful experience, and I want you to know that I do appreciate your energy here with me on this channel, for those of you who have watched thus far and who do choose to subscribe. So I am really grateful and honored for your presence here, and I will be with you again next week. Bye for now.